in your subconscious because he's affected by that programming. And so, subliminal. Subliminal means perceptible or perceivable to the subconscious mind, but not perceptible to the conscious mind. We got our first view of subliminal in 1957. It was in a little movie theater in New Jersey. The movie was Picnic, and it starred Kim Novak. Remember that? Yeah, I thought so. There were some advertising people. You might know they'd be capitalists looking for a buck that would discover this thing and bring it out in the open. But here's what happened. In the film that they ran that movie on that night, they put in every few frames. Now, I used to think it was a picture of popcorn, but it wasn't. It was the words, "Eat popcorn and drink Coca-Cola." It came on for 1/1000th of a second. Much too quick for you to see. Nobody saw it. And at least they didn't think they saw it, but somebody in there saw it, because the popcorn sales went up 58% that night, and the Coca-Cola sales went up 18%. See, your subconscious mind is so much more active and capable and powerful than your conscious mind. All your conscious mind does, remember, it can only deal with one little issue at a time. It takes the skim off the top. It takes just the top, the obvious, from what's being fed into it by its five senses. And 1/1000th of a second was just not enough time for the conscious mind to pick it up. But it went into the eye. The eye works all the time. Even things that only are there for 1/1000th of a second go into the eye, into the optic nerve, and their subconscious mind was perfectly capable of seeing it and reacting to it. And that's how come the popcorn sales went up that night. Let me tell you how the nation responded to that. Almost violently. We didn't like the idea that someone could control us. See, that's much more effective than an advertisement. Think about that. If they'd have just put a sign up that said, "Eat popcorn and drink Coca-Cola," do you think that had anywhere near those results? Of course not. Subliminal is much more powerful than something that's perceivable to your conscious mind, and people didn't like that. Now we have backmasking and rock records with satanic messages and drug-related messages, and don't think for a minute that those are not real, because they are. But you see, the fact that subliminal's been in the wrong hands all these years doesn't eliminate the fact that it's the most powerful mind-changing tool we've ever seen. And just like fire destroys if it's misused, it was one of the biggest boosts our civilization ever had when we harnessed it and found a way to use it correctly. And subliminal is a way to get into the back door, folks, of your room and change things in there without the guard voiding them and tainting them as they go in. See, when you play those tapes, he said, all your conscious mind is aware of hearing are those ocean waves. And I said, now, wait a minute. Either the voice is down underneath those waves or at a high enough volume so that you can hear them, or you can't. Now, one of your mind hearing them and the other mind not. And he said, Joe, he said, what you think is happening isn't anywhere near as what's happening. I said, what do you mean? He said, you think I'm talking. You folks tonight think that I'm making sounds. Words. You think you're hearing them. That isn't what's happening. I'm vibrating my vocal cords. I'm vibrating the air around us. And you have a corresponding little membrane in your ear, and it vibrates. And somehow those vibrations go into your mind, and you perceive that as sound. You think you're hearing me, but you're not. I'm not talking. All I'm doing is wiggling the air, folks, and wiggling your ear. Not any sounds, not any hearing. And don't make any mistake, when those subliminal tapes play, your eardrum vibrates with every one of those vibrations that are being made by each of those sounds. And your conscious mind is not capable of digging down in there and understanding the voice. But buried in those waves, down inside that sound, at a volume that can't be detected by the conscious mind, there's a voice talking. And the subconscious mind hears that voice. And you see, now there's a way to open up a back door into that room, and unknown to the guard, he doesn't have a chance to mess it up. His stinky attitude, as a result of the bad programming in there, doesn't have a chance to void out the message. And so without him even knowing what's going on, with old Hal being oblivious to the fact that we're in there changing his programming, we got a back door open now, and we're pouring in thousands of positive, potent, powerful new programming. He told me about the subliminal concept, this psychiatrist, at this seminar I was at. And I feel strange saying this now. But I have to tell you that I didn't, at that point, see the connection between the problem that I talked to him about earlier, that my students couldn't find a way to go and put the techniques that I taught them into effect, and the subliminal concept. I know it makes perfect sense now, but it didn't then. And I would have thrown away that piece of paper even at that point. I mean, it was interesting, but I didn't, you know, see any big flags wave when he said that. And I would have thrown that away, except that I looked down the list of programs and saw one entitled Gaining Confidence with the Opposite Sex. Now, let me tell you that story. At that point in my life, I'd been divorced, 6 or 8 months. Now, I've been married one time in my life for 17 years. I have 2 daughters, and then I got a divorce. And for those of you who haven't been through that, let me tell you what it's like. First, it's like cutting off your right arm. After 17 years, a bond grows between you and a person you're married to that's like severing a part of you. Then, after you go through that trauma, which was the toughest thing I ever went through in my life, you wake up in a brand new world every day. You're alone for the first time in a long time. Your friends are somehow different. They're all married, and you have to find a brand new way to cope with the world. I mean, everything is different. But I had a little bigger problem than that. And I understand my problem now as a result of going to a therapist. But I felt bad about myself, and I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but I, for lots of reasons, felt bad about myself when I was a little kid. I had the self-image of a cruddy little kid that wasn't as good as the other kids, and I began to shy away from them and be a rebel, and you know what little kids do when they feel like they're not liked, and because I was acting goofy and strange, well, they began to dislike me for real now, and now the problem compounds itself, and by the time I got to high school, I was a loner, absolute loner, felt terrible about myself. And I may as well go ahead and tell you that I really didn't find a way to fit into society at all. And I know this sounds strange, but one time I, just in an accident, was thrust and literally drug in front of a group of people and expected to say something to them. And I tried my best to, to respond to the situation. And I don't know how to describe this, but a personality came out of me in front of that crowd that I'd never felt before. And something happened, an electricity between me and that group of people. And for the first time, I remember seeing some acceptance and even some appreciation on the faces of other people. And I found a home in front of a crowd. So the only place I ever felt comfortable was in front of a crowd. I didn't feel comfortable one-on-one with anybody. I felt inferior. I felt intimidated by people one-on-one, especially if they were women. And I'll tell you why. And every man in this room can relate to this. When you're a cruddy little kid with a low self-image to begin with, when you're a cruddy little boy, little girls are better than you are. Do you know that? They're smarter, they make better grades, they write pretty, they smell good, they won't even touch frogs. You know, they're just different than little boys. They're just higher and better, and I was afraid of them. I got to tell you, I was scared to death of little girls. And folks, unless something changes the things in your room, you stay that way. And that little boy that was afraid of little girls grew up to be a 40-year-old successful man who was afraid of women. I got to tell you how bad it was, really, because I think people need to know that there are problems that we have that come from no logical reason at all that overpower us. I was in Hawaii. I was in a hotel. I was doing a seminar. This was about 3 or 4, maybe 5 months after I'd gotten divorced. And by an elevator, I saw one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life. She was a picture, and she didn't have a wedding ring on. And so I thought, I'll go up and say something to her. And folks, I'm going to tell you, I worked on it, and I worked on it, and I worked on it, and I just couldn't find the courage. And so I understand not being able to go execute a technique that somebody else feels easy. Because, folks, we got some problems in here that keep us from doing things we ought to be able to do, that we deserve to do, that we could do, that we're capable of doing if we just didn't have all of that junk back there keeping us back and holding us and keeping us from being limited. And so, it says gaining confidence with the opposite sex. I figure, what harm can it do me to listen to some waves? You know what I'm talking about? And so I ordered the tape. Well, when I get it, It's got some instructions with it. They said that I should listen to it at least 1 hour a day and that I should listen to it at least 21 days before I start looking for any results. I have never paid attention to instructions in my life. I figure if 1 hour a day would be good, 10 or 12 would be magnificent. And so here's what I did. I bought this little tape recorder here. I put this thing in my pocket. Now, this isn't the original cord. I've gone through 4 or 5 of these. This used to have 2 earphones on it. I cut one of them off so I could do business with the other ear, and I put this one here, and I'm playing waves. You know, I just thought of something. I'll bet you can hear the waves on this tape. Are you getting confident yet? Huh? So anyway, I put this thing in my ear. I'm listening 10, 12 hours a day to this thing. And after I get 50, 60, 70 hours in that tape, I begin to feel a difference inside. I began to gain a confidence that felt strange to me. There was a girl that worked in a restaurant that I used to go to real often in my hometown, and we got to talking one day, and see, she didn't know there was a difference. She just thought that she'd been wrong in her perception of what I used to be like. She said, Joe, gosh, well, you know, we were wrong about how you were. And I said, you've been talking about me? And she said, yeah. She said, now that it turns out we weren't right, I guess I can tell you. But she said, frankly, nobody in here liked you. And she said, you were a pretty generous tipper and what have you. But she said, you just acted like you were better than we were. You acted aloof. You just refused to even acknowledge us as human beings. I was scared to death of them. You know, I wonder how many of you give off a totally wrong impression and don't even know it. How many people don't? Because of a misconception of what you are, because of an attitude you give off, because of a problem you have in your subconscious mind, and as the years went by, you found a way to cope. See, my way to cope with women was to just avoid them, just to act better than they were. I didn't know I was doing that, but that's something to think about, because we do things we're not even aware we do, and they hold us back, and they affect people's attitude toward us. And I have to also tell you that problem, petty as it may sound, although it's not petty, it goes right to the core of anybody. Being able to relate to the opposite sex is important to any human being. But that problem had affected a lot of areas. In fact, it had touched virtually every part of my life. And week by week, as I listened to those tapes, I felt myself become a better person. I had more confidence in lots of areas. Well, by this point, it has dawned on me that this thing can solve the problems that people have and keeping them from doing the things that they need to be able to do in order to become financially successful. And so I flew to Michigan, a company called Midwest Research. A company been in existence 7 years. Some of the most quality people I've ever met, dedicated to making those the finest self-help tool ever. I mean, they're with a breakthrough. They're with, I think, one of the biggest assets mankind has ever had. And here's their story. You see, anybody can make a subliminal tape, and there are several companies that have the things on the market. All you have to do is go down to Radio Shack, we'll give them a plug, and buy a little piece of equipment for a couple of $100 that'll put something on a tape at a higher volume than something else. And so then you speak these positive affirmations: I'm good, I'm courageous, I'm creative, I'm enthusiastic, whatever it is you want to be. And then you just put some music or some waves or some rain or whatever a little louder than your conscious mind can hear, and play it to yourself. The problem is, probably about the best you could do is put 600 or 700, maybe 1,000 repeats of those affirmations or suggestions on a 1-hour tape. And folks, you'll play those things till doomsday, trying to put enough of those in there to overcome the years and years and years of negative suggestions that you have in your subconscious mind. So they began to work with multi-tracks, multi-tones, multi-frequencies in an effort to layer lots of voices on a tape. They first found a way to put 8,000 on a 1-hour tape. Then they got to where they could put 22,000 affirmations, then 80,000, and now between 80 and 110,000 affirmations on every tape they make. And folks, I'm going to tell you something. When you pour that kind of power into your mind, things begin to happen. So I went and talked to those folks, and by the way, the weight loss tape is the first tape that they ever made. See, the way The way to lose weight, and I may as well tell you this, I've had a weight problem all my life. I've weighed as much as 60 pounds more than I weigh right now. I've lost 23,000 pounds in my lifetime and gained it all back and gone up and down and up and down. But the way to lose weight is to change this thing. You need to change how you feel about food. You need to change your eating habits from way back here. See, if you tell your mind, I want to be a thin person, then your mind says, okay, let me know when we get to be thin, and I'll act like we are thin. See, your subconscious mind operates in the now, folks. The only way to become thin is to say, I'm thin. The only way to become wealthy is to say, I am wealthy. But see, your conscious mind doesn't believe you're wealthy, and so when you try to say that, it doesn't do any good. And so if you leave the conscious mind out and 100,000 times an hour you pour in there, I don't get particularly hungry. I prefer nutritional foods and small amounts of them. My bodily organs function properly. I'm a thin person who takes pride in their body. That's the way to lose weight, and it works, doesn't it, Tony? So I took the 12 characteristics that I feel a person has to have in order to be financially successful, and I put them into an album, a 12-cassette album called Program Yourself for Success. And here are these 12 areas. The first one is self-confidence. Folks, self-confidence is your faith in your ability to do something. See, I've known for a long time that people wouldn't go use my no-money-down techniques because they were afraid. Fear, you know, I thought was our biggest enemy. You folks just got to overcome your fear. But, folks, fear is the symptom. Let me tell you what the disease is. The disease is they don't have any faith in their ability to go do it. And if you really genuinely think that there's a good chance you're going to mess it up and end up in worse shape than when you started, no wonder you're afraid to do it. In fact, you're a fool if you do it, if you really think that. But, folks, you feeling like you're not capable of doing something that I've done or Tony's done or anybody else has done is just a result of the stench from the garbage in your room. Because you're a human being, and if they did it, you can do it, and all you need is some reprogramming. What you need is 100,000 times an hour. The message to go in, I am a capable, competent person. I can learn how to do something that anyone else did, and I'm capable of doing it, and if I don't do it the first time, I'll learn from that experience, and in the end, I'll overcome and I'll get it done. That's what you need to think, and that's got to come from the inside. The second thing you have to have is self-image. Now, that may sound like an overlap, but it's not. Self-confidence, I just told you, is your faith in your ability to do something. Your self-image is your picture of yourself. See, you may feel perfectly capable of doing something, but don't feel worthy to have the result of having done that. And we somehow think maybe it'd be taken away from us. We'd lose it if we did happen to get it. And so we half-heartedly make the effort or don't make it at all. Now, success motivation is the third one that I chose. Folks, motivation means desire. You show me somebody 65 who's among that infamous group of 95% of Americans who can't support themselves at retirement time, and I'll show you somebody that just didn't want it bad enough to get up and go through the things necessary and do the things necessary to get it done. It's just about that simple. And you can't borrow somebody else's desire. Motivation, desire, has got to come from inside, folks. And that's where these tapes put it. They, see, it doesn't feel like it's coming from the outside. It comes from the inside, because once the programming gets changed back here where you're not aware, and that breeze starts to come out that door, it starts to feel good, and you just become a more powerful, more capable, more confident person. And the desire's there. See, what you need is something telling your subconscious mind, my desires are stronger than my fears. My desires for the things that I've set up as worthwhile goals are stronger than my feelings of inadequacy. They're stronger than my fear of rejection. And anytime there's a battle, then my